Just getting going. For those on the playback, you know how it is. If you're on the playback, skip a couple minutes. You know your boy gotta allow people to get in. Slavery flourishes in the South. I wonder if I could pull this book back up. The Americans, a History. Let's try that. Let's try to pull the actual book up. What the hell, dude? All right, that book is from 1996. Okay. Let me see what some of the older ones. Let's pull this one first. This may or may not be the right one, but let's just see. Okay. There's a 1970 history of the United States. We got a history of Black Americans. 1975. Kind of curious about that. So we're just getting started. Let me pull up a couple of these. 1923, the history of Finnish Americans. Huh? Never heard of that. Finnish. How many people knew that people from Finland were over here? As early as 1923, if not before that. That's kind of odd. English history for the Americas, 1914. The Chicanos, a history of Mexican Americans. That's 1972. We getting started here. The history of Finnish Americans again, huh? All right, that ain't really the topic. I'm just kind of going through these real quick as English history for Americans. These old books, these old textbooks from school. We're looking at some old school textbooks. A history of Swedish Americans of Minnesota. Swedish? Who knew the Swedes was here? As early as 1910. Even I didn't know this shit. I really wasn't even looking for these. You know, we look at these as just all YT folks, but it's like they definitely delineate each other. Okay, so today's topic is we're gonna be looking into this book. Let me see if this book that I just pulled up is the exact book. Not that I really need the exact book, but you never know. You might be able to find something new. Might be able to find something new on here or something. So let's just go through. Let's see if this is the same one. I think it is. Yes, it's the right one. All right. This way you all get to see it actually does come from a book. We're going to be talking about this section right here. Now, what's important with this section right here? Well, it's talking about colonial life. Now, this is a school textbook from 1996. So this is a recent school textbook, last 30 years. And here you have the Roots book, or not the Roots, but here you have a book, history book that was taught in schools, right? The Scarlet Letter, Evidence of the Ice Age, linking past to present, place names, the Europeans reach America, page 12. The English colonists arrive in page 21. But you know what I find that's very intriguing in a school book is Alex Haley Roots. The Alex Haley Roots. Why would Alex Haley Roots be in a school textbook? And let's read what it says about it. It's been a minute since I actually went to the page about it. Let's see, 37, page 37. Let's hit up page 37. As if we're in class. What is that saying? Hold on real quick. What is this saying about New Spain? As soon as I saw the map of New Spain, I had to see what it's saying real quick. It says, from where did the American forces come to Buena Vista? Location where was the only Mexican victory? Let's see what's on this map. So this is Texas. If it's Texas right now, this must be after the westward expansion. It says territory disputed by Mexico. I've seen a map similar to this, but not this one. They probably made it up for this book. But it's similar, it's close. Okay. Migrants to new land, colonial life page. Right here. All right, what is it saying about roots in a school book? What is it saying? Because, and we'll get to it. Let me see how far down it goes. If that might be the only mention, to be honest. Large farms, blah blah blah. Okay. Cheap labor, whatever. I say Bacon's Rebellion. I really got to look into that. People have told me so many times, you got to look into Bacon's Rebellion. It was a key moment for certain things. Slavery flourishes. Okay. So they don't even really have much about Alex Haley roots. They do have a timeline down here, and I love to see what they show on their timelines. They leave a lot of stuff out. Bacon's Rebellion in 1676, okay. Philadelphia was founded. German settlement begins in Pennsylvania. Why are the Germans settling in Pennsylvania? In the 1683 time. Because you got to really think. They said, hey, the American Revolutionary War was fought by people by British people and whatever trying to succeed from the British, right? But when did the Germans become part of that? Well, I know why, but we can get to that some other time. Scotch-Irish settlements begin. Slavery importation rapidly accelerates. Notice how it says 1700. Notice how there really ain't hardly any slaves here prior to 1700. They try to find ways to go back on the dates by 1612 or the 1620, the first slaves from Jamestown were brought in, 20 or so Negroes. They say 20 or so Negroes was brought in around 1620. They don't say anything in between 1620 and 1700 hardly, typically. And they be like, oh, by 1715, we started bringing in a bunch of them. And then by 1808, peace, what's up? How you doing there, royalty? And then after that, you can't bring anybody else into the United States after 1808. So you really only have about 100 years for total of them really bringing people in by bulk. The other times you don't really have a lot, but they try to throw in extra years because they done already lied to you as far as the amount of people that came over. Like, let's say this, I'll show you. Like this right here. This comes from the census.gov. It goes from 1790 to 1850, and it's going to count all the amount of black people that was here. They would say slaves. All your free and non-free black people are on this list. There's the free people. But when you come down here, excuse me, gassed up. When you come down here, it lists where the importation started between 1715 and 1708. Not started, but the bulk of it. But even the bulk of the importations listed are a guesstimation. when you have to put numbers like this with all zeros, whole numbers, that really means you're kind of just guessing it. Okay? It says the number imported. It says the number since 1790 is evidently too small. Charlestown alone in the 4 years 1804, 1805, 1806, and 1807 imported 39,000, making therefore a correction for such underestimate. See, notice they said these are estimates, underestimate, and a very liberal increase to Mr. something. It says these were consigned to 91 British subjects, 88 citizens of Rhode Island, 10 French subjects, 13 natives of Charleston. What? Increase very liberal. These were co-signed to 91, and that's a census right there. 91 British subjects, 88 Rhode Island subjects of Rhode Island, 10 French subjects, 13 natives of Charleston. So anyways, I don't know. That part's a little different. But right up here, it says, hey, the trade of Negro slaves. Let me see if I can highlight it. I can't highlight it. The trade of Negro slaves to the American colonies was too small before 1753 to attract much attention. Right? And then it also talks about the British West Indies exporting to the colonies some slaves. But what I'm mostly getting at is you don't really have a whole lot of slaves coming in here. I mean, you have guesstimates. Is this just one state? No, this would be the entire United States, so-called. Really just the colonies. Just the colonies, because they didn't expand until the West until after 1808. Notice how in Alabama, Arkansas, California, you don't have any numbers in 1790, 1800, 1810, because the Louisiana Purchase didn't happen until 1803. Statehood for these states didn't happen until 1820, 1830. And so you start counting people after that. But by then, wasn't no importations coming in. It was banned. So if no importations are coming in, where are these black people coming from? These hundreds of thousands of black people in Arkansas, Alabama, Louisiana. After the Louisiana Purchase, there's 34,000, 69,000, 109,000, 168,000. As they expanded, the numbers increased. Okay, so all of these importations right here that they said came in between these years really just came in on the East Coast. The only ones that could come not on the East Coast would be between 1803 and 1808, because that's when you had westward expansion. There's not enough time to get enough people down there to that south. So why is this important? Well, today's topic is going to be about slavery propaganda. What can we prove? What can we not prove? How much proof is there? What's some of the stories out there? And we're going to be talking about this since we got more people in here now. So now we can kind of get into the discussion. So what am I looking at here? I'm looking at a 1996 American history book. Now, why am I so concerned? We're looking at history from 1996 or any years prior to now. Well, because these people are tricky. They like to teach you things and change it up and teach something new, you know? And they like to redo it all the time. So coming in here, we can kind of get an idea on what was taught in 1996 when I was a kid, when I was in school, to be honest. And to be honest, when I first got in here, I noticed one thing immediately over here in chapter 2. I ain't even really made it past chapter 2 since I found out about this. I do need to look at the rest of the book to find some other stuff that's probably propaganda. Um, it's cool. That's kind of cool. They got a guerrilla warfare section about the Indians. I need to take a look at that. But okay, so notice right here you have this right here. Links to American literature from Roots by Alex Haley. Why is that important? Why is it? Why would Roots be in a textbook? What's up, Melanie? Empress? He said, "Wow." Yeah, why would Roots be in a textbook? It's one thing to say, "Hey, I remember seeing it in school because it went to court." Yeah, it shouldn't be. It should. We're gonna. I'm gonna show y'all that. What's up, Tasha Nicole? Peace. Um, he shouldn't be. That book shouldn't be anywhere in the school books, right? Because we know that they had to go to court about that book. What's up, Latrice? Appreciate it. Peace. Good morning. Grand rising to the folks. So why is this important? Well, Alex Haley lied about that whole thing. Alex Haley and Roots, plagiarism, changed American Indian identity. Now somebody wrote that. That obviously was on our side, right? They said American Indian identity. Grand Rising Brass Prophet, what's happening? He said, I don't know if I said it before, but I despise my professor teachings. I feel you on that, Mr. Adams, Dr. Adams. Same here. I don't even remember anything they really taught. I'm sure some of the stuff in my head is basic stuff from them, but you've never watched Roots. I probably should watch it on this live stream, and we should break it down one day. I said that before. I probably will do that. I might do that later today if I don't get too busy. I got some stuff I got to do, but thought it was just me. I remember watching it. Well, I don't know if I watched it or if the things that I can see in my head about it are just flashes of commercials about it or something. I just kind of like vaguely remember something, but I don't remember like sitting down and fully watching it, but it's possible when I was like super, super, super young. So when you think about it, we're going to get to more of that, but you have this in the textbooks in school in 1996, okay? They're talking about Roots, but Roots was known to be plagiarized. Let's look at some other things about it being plagiarized. They said, where is that? Yes, with his face next to it, yes. Mr. Alex Haley admitted to plagiarizing some passages from Harold Corlander's 1967 novel, The African, in his books, Roots. So he admitted, according to the AI. But let's get a little deeper than the AI. Let's see if I got that up. If I got that saved. It might be in my phone and not on my iPad. Because I had the actual court case where it's this guy. He says, like, man, I gave him the book. I literally handed him the book and said, hey, man, you should check this book out called The African. And let me open this up. Maybe it's in this area. It must be on my phone. Okay. Well, just believe me. There's the case. It's actually on here. And when you go down, it talks more about the lawsuit. But there's also other websites about it. But either way, you have this. And he tried to make it spooky and that they were staring at him. Right. I know, right? Just the cover alone makes it look annoying as hell. Like, at least this dude over here on this one almost looks like I'm breaking out of chains. I'm coming for the freedom or something a little bit, maybe a little bit. He looks really effeminized, very effeminized. Sorry about that, LeVar Burton. You did real good in reading Rainbow, but you know they did you wrong in Roots. I'm just saying they did you wrong in Roots. He do look kind of like Shannon Sharp. Yeah, that's one of my people. That's the African. I remember being with the Africans. Is that what they did? Yeah. I remember being with that. That's one of my folks. But my folks used to tell me that back in the day I was one of those people. But I didn't know. I mean, they told me I was African, but I thought I was thumbnails at the same time. This lip came from somewhere, but maybe it came from the African. Okay, let me shut up. Let me shut up. Oh, that's funny. Shannon Sharp ass. So now we know that they plagiarized it. Now we know that they plagiarized it. What is it doing in the school books? Well, let's read the page that it's on. It's only one page. So it's like they put it in the school books to kind of solidify it. It's like even if you didn't watch it, you at least read it in the school book. What page was that again? Hold on. I think it was 36. 36, yeah. So it's like they put it in the school book because it's like even if you don't watch it, you have heard about it in school. So when people talk about it, literally it's that easy. When people talk about it, you'll talk about it. You'll be like, yeah, that damn Alex, hey, that Roots. Yeah, I remember that. And then there was so much propaganda promotion around it that at least you probably seen some of the images. So you like, that's how easy it is to program us, unfortunately, in our younger days. Just tell us something and maybe provide some images on a continual basis for a little bit, and it's stuck in your head, and now it's going to become a talking point. Shit, I must have skipped that day. So, what does it say here? They ain't even got much to talk about. It says, links to American literature. He said that they saw stolen people chained inside long, stout, heavily guarded bamboo pens along the shore of the river. When small canoes brought important acting toubab, which I guess that's what they're trying to say. They say white tea man. From the big canoes, the stolen people were dragged outside their pens onto the sand. Their heads had been shaved, and they had been greased until shined all over. First, they were made to squat and jump up and down, said Omoro. And then, who the hell is Omoro? And then, when the toubab had seen enough of that, they ordered the stolen people's mouths forced open for their teeth and their throats to be looked at, and stuck burning hot irons against their back and shoulders. Then, screaming and struggling, the people were shipped toward the water where small canoes waited to take them out to the big canoes. My brothers and I watched many fall into their bellies, clawing and eating the sand, as if to get one last bite of their home. Y'all do remember to reading this idiotic shit. So listen to that. My brothers and I watched many fall into their bellies, clawing and eating the sand, as if to get one last bite of their home of Africa. Like, this is what he's saying. This is like the story of them leaving Africa. Now, I don't know who the hell told him this. Like, he's too old, and this is too modern of a time, because he probably just passed, but it's too modern of a time for him to interview anybody fresh off the boat. Remember, importations came in of Africans. The latest is 1808. So if he was interviewing somebody in like even in 1950, motherfucker would be like 150 years old. Okay, so he's not interviewing anybody from that. So I don't know where he got that information, and that would have been the tail end of it. But okay. So who told him, hey, I remember somebody eating sand to try to get a little last bite of Africa. That was so stupid. But it says they were dragged and beaten, even in the small canoes in the water. He told Kunta and Lamin. Some kept fighting against the whips and the clubs until they jumped into the water among terrible fish with gray backs and white bellies and curved mouths full of thrashing teeth that reddened the water with their blood. See, that when you say something like that, that's throwing extras on it. Like, typically, if somebody was to talk, they would and not trying to tell this outlandish ass story. They would say, "Man, look, sadly enough, some of those people fell into the water and they may have gotten eaten by some fish or something. Man, it was, and I just saw I just saw bloody water. It was a horrible scene." Like, you wouldn't go into all this. Man, among the terrible fish, graybacks and white bellies. First of all, graybacks and white bellies. You think somebody's who the hell is explaining fish to look like that, or sharks, or anything? You would say sharks, dolphins, some kind of fish. It was the graybacks and white bellies with the curved mouths, full of thrashing teeth. Fuck out of here, man. And this is in a school textbook. Think about this. This is in a school textbook. Okay? This is in a school textbook in 1996. You mean to tell me in 1996, y'all still was on some propaganda shit? Y'all didn't think this was too much fluff for reality? No, they was trying to indoctrinate you. And that's all they had to say about Alex Haley. It says, as you have seen in previous chapter, many styles of colonial life, Americans were slave traders who viewed their job. One group of colonial Americans were slave traders who viewed their job, the acquisition, transportation, the sale of slaves, as just a business activity. Moral issues were not a consideration. Gradually, however, some people began to recognize the moral issue involved and felt strongly enough about social justice to make their voices heard. Okay. Let me turn that off. Okay, you're right. This is the kind of fluff. They just want you to think, hey, these white team people, they had no morals. They had no whatever when they was doing this. So they treated these people any kind of way. So just believe any kind of crazy story that they tell you about treatment because they had no morals, right? So as we say, they raped them and they threw them over the board in the water. They made them eat their own vomit or something crazy, right? Just believe it. We're just going to throw any kind of extra on top of it. And then it starts to go into the chapter. So the whole Alex Haley chapter was just an excerpt to scare you about some Africans coming over on the boat. Because again, where did you get this first-hand account information that's so detailed that they remember gray backs and white bellies with the curved mouths of thrashing teeth, bloodying up the water of the remains of their folks? Said, this is why I follow you. Appreciate that. You can see how idiotic it sounds, very much. And they got it in there to teach the kids. It's different when you read it thoroughly, spiritually awakened eyes. That's real. That's real. Indoctrination for the masses. So now think about this in two different ways. Not only was the movie fake and plagiarized, and Alex Haley lied, and Kunta Kinte really wasn't his family member with his lying ass. But on top of that, they threw this story into a textbook, which is supposed to make you think that you're going to get some information about true direct history utilizing the movie Roots, which you would supposed to think that that's based on a true story. And then when you read it, it's just a bunch of bullshit fluff about eating sand and being eaten by fish and being clubbed in the head and all this other stuff. They done clubbed us in the head. They made us. They ate us. They threw us over the water. They put hot irons all over us and we was burning. You know what I'm saying? And we was struggling and there was forest. Like, just think about all the things in this one, all the propagandistic fear-mongering things just in this one section. And who was that for, though? That's for you black. That's for us black folks, us so-called black folks. That's and for the white folks too. White folks feel pretty good about that. Damn, we did y'all like that. I'm scared of you right now. I can't beat none of y'all up right now 1-on-1. But looks like we was whooping y'all's ass back in the day in groups. That's amazing. That's empowering the white T mind, right? At the same time, degrading the black mind. Man, they did that to us. We was bipped and this and all this other stuff. I don't even know if I want to get in the water. That's crazy. That's really crazy. So let's get over here. So let's look at some other things about slavery. Slavery propaganda, right? Well, according to them, anybody brought over from Africa was a slave, right? Man or woman. Now, they never really tell you how a person could buy their way to freedom. But there were free blacks here. And they would admit that, yeah, some people was able to buy their way to freedom. And when you Google it, let's just say if you were to Google it, how were black slaves able to buy their freedom in America without being paid? Mr. AI. Or Miss AI, I don't know. Could be non-gender, binary, you know. Says, well, while most enslaved people did not have the ability to buy their freedom, some who were able to earn money through skilled trades, how'd they get a skilled trade? Or being hired out for what? Could use their earnings to purchase their freedom through a process called self-purchase. But if you're hired out, that means your master would have hired you out to somebody to go make money, right? Why wouldn't your master take that from you? He's supposed to be making money off of you, right? What's up, Hitch? Peace. Man, you think exactly as I do. Just because it's in the book don't mean it's true. That's true. That is true. So, in a process called self-purchase. But who would, think about this, who would pay a slave? Man, we brought you here from Africa, and you pretty much got beaten, slandered, and all this other stuff, right? And I went out there to the market, and they looked you over with your naked self, and we decided to buy you for $300, $400, $500, which was a lot of money at that time. Okay, we decided to buy you for $300, $400, $500, and we need that money back, right? So we need you to get out here and work, but we're gonna pay you. Yeah, we bought you so we could pay you. Does that make sense? Yeah, we feel a little sad about making you work for free, so we're gonna give you a little bit of this money. But you're still a slave now. Now don't you leave, and I'm gonna beat the hell out of you. And I'm gonna force your kids to go different places. In fact, I don't even know how the hell you're gonna have kids with the way that they talk about slavery. I'm rolling up one as I go on this tangent. With the way they talk about slavery, I don't even know how the hell anybody was able to procreate. Hell, one of the things they say about the ships is that about 3/4 of the people that came over on the boat were males. So if most of the people that came on the boats were men, who the hell they having sex with? Right? I guess a few of them, a few women is enough to propagate that the entire race of what we got now of almost 4 million people by like 1850. It's almost like 4 million of us. So not only did they bring over the women and the men, they didn't bring over many women, but somehow those men were able to get with those women and find time to have sex. Mix, whatever, the word. Have relations, my bad. Now, how does that happen? Yeah. We brought you here. I need you out there in the field working. I said, this is crazy, the indigenous women. I need you out there in the field working, making me my money, making me my bread, all kind of hours, driving the whip on you. And you're going to work 6 days a week, maybe even 7, but at least 6 and at least 12 to 15-hour days. By the time you get off, you ain't going to have time to go find somebody who wants to do anything with anybody, right? But even then, why would your slave master want you to even impregnate somebody without being in trouble? Because if you impregnate somebody, now when she gets old up in her pregnancy in months, further down the month in her pregnancies, and further down the months in her pregnancy, I'm sorry. Now she's not going to be able to work the field like that as much. So now you're losing money. Now you're not getting as much productivity. And there's studies that talk about that when they talk about slave breeding. I'm about to go. I'm almost done with my little roll up, and then we're gonna get into it. But so think about it. You got purchasing. Let's get back on the purchases. So how do people get paid? They say, hey, you was a skilled trade. Who taught a slave a skilled trade besides picking up stuff and doing mundane stuff? Go build that, like even the building of houses. You can say, well, maybe the YT man taught you how to build a house, and over the time of you building his house, you built up the skilled trade of being a carpenter. So he hired you out to go build somebody else's house. Well, who's supposed to get that bread? You think they're gonna give you some of that bread? You just built their house. Now they need some more money. I can understand at least you got a skilled trade. What's up, CR the Great? I can understand at least you got a skilled trade. But how the hell? Why the hell would I let you keep the money? But they never really explain it, okay, is what I'm getting to. They never really explain it. So, but self-purchase was a thing. You could buy yourself for freedom. So think about this. You're coming over on a boat. The only thing you're meant to be is a slave. But then they passed things like slave laws saying, hey, if, let me see if I have it down here. The slavery of a person is going to follow the mother. So the slavery of the mother determines the slavery status of a child. And it's somewhere. Hell, I ain't going to get to it. But that's what they say. Y'all know that, right? So think about it. That means every offspring those women have should be slaves. And everybody should be slaves. The men that came over were slaves. All women were slaves. So the only people that can be free are those who purchase themselves whatsoever. Otherwise, everybody's supposed to be a perpetual slave, according to the narrative, right? That's what they try to say. All people coming are perpetual slaves. And then you got stuff like this, little marker signs. Okay. Let's talk about slavery transportation. They say, hey, in order to meet the high demands for slaves in Alabama in the early 1800s, remember, they just got there after 1803, didn't really become a state and start counting anybody on the census till 1820. I think statehood happened somewhere between 1810 and 1820. That's why you don't have an 1810 census, but you have an 1820. But Alabama, early 1800s. It says slave traders chained African Americans together in coffles or coffees, whatever that is, and forced them to march hundreds of miles from upper South to the lower South. Now, this is different. I want y'all to, this is not going to be, I don't think this is going to talk about them coming in on boats, because this is, okay, yeah. So, but this is important. So let me just paint the picture real quick. Again, Most of your slavery importations happened between 1715 to 1808, right? That's when your slaves came in on boats, supposedly. Now, again, they didn't count anybody until 1820 in Alabama and these other states. And Alabama is who we're talking about. And that's after 1808. So that means you can't say all these black people came from an African boat fresh off the water, right? So you got to come up with some other story. And I remember finding this. And I said, oh, okay. So they say, hey, in order to meet the high demand for slaves in Alabama, why is it a high demand? Y'all just got there. What do you mean? It was Indian territory before that. And then you had to remove the Indians, even though some of them stayed. Many of them. That's why it's so black today. But you had to remove the Indians. And then you could do that. So I don't know where the high demand came. What do you mean high demand? Okay. But anyways, it says for slaves in the early 1800s, slave traders chained African Americans together in coffles and forced them to march hundreds of miles from the upper South, not the North. Because why would they say the upper South to the lower South, including Montgomery? Why would they say that? Because you can't really explain slavery in the North at that time because it was abolished, right? Slavery was abolished in the North. You say you figured out why? You might be talking to somebody up there now. I got some research I need. Remember your family, I'm on the clock right now, though. For sure. That's my hometown. First, the Irish, this system of indentured servitude of the Irish began in the 1600s. Yep. They've been bringing them in. Then the African slavery began. Yep. They've been bringing in YT folks. And indentured servitude is pretty much slavery. They could beat you. You can even be owned by black folks. We'll talk about that too. They were scared that you'd be owned by a black man and he'd be beating you in all your YT glory. And that's what they talk about in the newspapers. So you're on the right track. You got to add Canada to the territories too at some point. Mm-hmm. Facts, yes, sir. And so they say, hey, we're going to march a bunch of slaves from the upper South to the lower South of Montgomery, because what they're trying to do is they're trying to explain where did these people come from out of nowhere. There's 41,000, big jump to 116,000, then a super huge jump to 253,000 after 1830. That's a real important year, and we'll get to that. But they got to make up something for that. And they're saying, hey, we marched a bunch of people from the upper South to the lower South. It says the overland transportation of enslaved people by foot was slow and expensive. By the 1840s, slave traders began to take advantage of two new modes of transportation, the steamboat, and the railroad. Notice the steamboat wasn't invented until coming around them 1800s. Notice the steamboat, right? Steamboats carried slaves from Mobile and New Orleans up to Alabama River to Montgomery. So they was intracontinental, and I can show you the slave ship manifest that prove that from the National Archive records. It says railroads constructed with slave labor connected Montgomery's train station to West Point, Georgia, and lines extending to the upper South. Hundreds of slaves began arriving by rail and by boat each day in Montgomery, turning the city into a principal slave trading center in Alabama. Enslaved people who arrived at the riverfront or at the train station were paraded up Commerce Street to be sold in the city's slave markets. So what they're saying, if it holds true, that they marched hundreds of thousands of people from the upper South to the lower South then we should see a decrease in population, right? They were doing it so fast, they was going by steamboats and rails, right? Sending them out there however they could, get them out there, right? By 1840, they had to, and they couldn't do it until by 1840. And notice what they're trying to do. See how funny they try to play? Because they know that's when that increase happens. They know that's when that increase happens. But I'm gonna explain the increase. I know how that increase happened. They want to explain it by a migration. Well, if there is a migration, that means there should be a subtraction of numbers, right? Especially if you're doing it so quick in 10-year spans. That means there should be subtractions of population numbers, right? Well, let's see if any of them subtract. Or let's just see if they all grow. Let's see Virginia. Virginia had the most black slaves in there. Surely they would have said, you know what? Let's get some out of Virginia's ass, right? But Virginia went from 293 to 345 to 392, 425, 469. They were growing almost 30, 40 kids, 40,000 people a year. 40, that's 50,000 right there. That's about 50,000 each. 50,000 new growth almost ish on each year. So that's not a decrease. They didn't take them from here to Alabama. That don't make up that number. So, okay. South Carolina. They had 107,000. Surely they took some from South Carolina to Alabama, right? Oh, that's 146,000, 196, 258, 315, 390. Oh, that's not a subtraction. North Carolina, right? Maybe they took it from North Carolina. 100, 133, 168, 205, and so on and so forth. Okay, well, they tried to sneak them out of them smaller states. Okay, let's look at the smaller states. Let's see, like Pennsylvania. Well, that's not upper south. Upper south that's super north. That's not upper south. What would be the upper south? Georgia, maybe. Well, Georgia shows increase, hella increase. 1830, westward expansion on top, because they was in part of Georgia in the colonies, like half of Georgia, but the other half was still Indian territory until around this time, until 1803 also. Connecticut, Delaware, where they getting these niggas from? Jersey, New York, Carolina, Pennsylvania, Rhode Island. They didn't have too many upper south places to goddamn choose from. Tennessee, 3,000, 13,000, 44,000, 80,000. So how do they do this? How do you just make something like this up and say, hey, we had to march a lot of y'all from one area to the next? Well, if they label you as slaves on paperwork, even though that just really in many cases meant you are a worker, doesn't always mean you were whipped, beaten, and chained up and forced to not. Because if all that was happening, the population wouldn't increase on a steady thing. People would be falling out. In fact, some of the stories that they say, let me see if I got one of them idiotic video clips. They be throwing all them extras on the story. Let's see. No. It's pretty odd. I would have thought I would have had some of them video clips in here. I know what one is at. I'm surprised I didn't put those in there, unless I put them in a different one. But I'll show you this one. Like this dude, he was presenting a little presentation. Every time they present their little presentations and they talk about slavery, even though it is what it is, he's talking about the Geechee people. They always use a lot of the same things and say the same stuff. Let me see if this is going to say it. Not that one. Right here. Okay, listen to how this dude This professor explained slavery.
For control of the region. And by the 1700s, as we all know, Spain ceded its territory of Florida to Great Britain.
You're forgetting the forced birth. That was a lie. Let me go ahead and just debunk that for that person real fast. All you got to do is slave breeding. Slave breeding. All you got to do is Google it. Now, don't just read this, okay? And that's what a lot of y'all like to do because y'all lazy. You want to go down and look for edus, .orgs, .edus, studies that have been done, like that Cambridge study from Cambridge University, all right, that I'm going to click on. Or how about one from Yale University, the slave breeding hypothesis, okay? Coming down here, it says, despite extensive research, there are few, if any, documented cases of slaveholders breeding slaves for sale. Okay? Many different little buzzword phrases like that. Let's say, if it says right here, if the term is not used unreasonable literalness, it would mean that more than owner coerced matings, numerous shreds of evidence exist which indicate that slaves were reared with an eye for marketability. The domestic slave trade was not purely casual. So hold on. That evidence of systemic slave breeding is scarce. My bad. That's what I was supposed to read that part. That evidence of systemic slave breeding is scarce. Indeed, not only because it is unlikely that many engaged in it, but also because written records of such activities would seldom be kept. But if the term is not used with unreasonable literalness, if it means more than owner coerced matings, numerous shreds of evidence exist, whatever to indicate that. So like they're saying, like, you would need a lot of evidence from many just random guys saying, "Hey, I made it." If there are no actual slave farms, like they actually got a big amount of people doing this, then you would need papers or accounts from different people saying that they either seen it or they were doing it, because there's nobody talks about it in the newspapers or in anything that they could find that says, "Hey, we done bred up about 400 for you. Come and get you some." You know, it's nothing like that, and that's what they're saying. Stamp suggests that breeders did not record such practices because of the reprehensible nature. The lack of documentation may also indicate that relatively few slaveholders bred slaves. Because it is unobservable, researchers have looked for circumstantial evidence of slave breeding. It says Richard Such, for example, analyzes slave fertility rates that are too high to have occurred naturally. This is what I want to talk about. So slave fertility rates that are too high to have occurred naturally. So what are they doing? They're looking at numbers, right? And they're like, wait a minute. There's a lot of people right there from here to here. How can I explain that? Right? That's not doing research. Okay, I mean, to a degree, I do the same thing, but I find other sources to back up the things that happen that could cause that. They just kind of be like, "Hey, I can't really explain this number increase, so that's probably slave breeding." Okay, is what they're saying. Between 1790 and 1860, which that's what this whole thing right here is, 1790 to 1850. 1860, right? Approximately 1 million slaves migrated from the southeastern United States to the southwestern frontier. Look, they're repeating that propaganda. Because if you were really looking at this, where do you see 1 million people leaving from? Where the hell did they leave from? Okay? From the upper south. Where do you see 1 million people being subtracted from a state or cumulative states? These people just make this shit up, okay? But at least they somewhat try to whatever. They said this forced migration took two basic forms: the migration of planters and their slaves, and the interregional slave trade. Migrating planters were basically non-selective and took all their slaves regardless of the ages of gender. In contrast, traders purchased slaves singly, and for those slaves, I guess it means singly, and for the slave inevitable, whatever. But so they talking about just the forced migration of slaves is making up that number, even though that doesn't make the number up either. But not slave breeding, as they say. Hey, it definitely wasn't no slave breeding. Higher child women ratios may indicate higher fertility rates if not deliberate slave breeding, whether systemically bred or not. The natural increase of the slave force was an important, probably the most important product of the most exhausted soil of the Old South. Rather than indicating higher fertility, Fogel and whatever his name is write that the higher child-woman ratio, if the exporting areas is a statistical artifact, a fertility rate, it should be remembered, is a ratio. A denominator consists not only of married, man, they're going too far. The denominator consists not only of married women but also of single women. Hence, the fertility rate will be higher than the Old South if the share of single women without children in the interregional migration was higher than in the population that had remained. Shut the hell up, man. None of that has nothing to do with it. It wasn't slave breeding, and it definitely wasn't a forced migration. Because you would see it if y'all was counting, and it's like the most idiotic thing if you think about it. My bad, I haven't been looking now, but it's like the most idiotic thing when you think about it, because you're gonna tell us that 1 million people migrated from the upper South to the lower South, knowing good and damn well you counted everybody every year. So it wouldn't be hard for us to prove that. I should see 50,000 people going from here. I should see 50,000 people going from South Carolina. Their numbers should start back low and then climb back high. That's what you should see to make up these numbers and other numbers like Louisiana and Arkansas and Mississippi and whatever ones, right? To make up all these numbers. So let's get back to this dude. Because on top of that, now not only do you have to make up these numbers, now you also have to have better stories saying, hey, when we brought these 300, because remember, they brought in so-called 300,000 by 1808. But by 1808, just in the slaves, not including who was free, by 1808, 1810, there was 1.2 million. Okay. Now we're not going to see increases from that 333,000 getting to 1.1 million. In many cases, just to see you can understand what a natural increase would be from 300-some thousand people off of this shit alone. As I'm taking a look at it, 345,000 people. About how many kids would they have every 10 years? Increase of about 50. Not how many kids, because there's attrition. You also have people who pass away, right? So you have an increase of about 50,000 on average from births and deaths. Increases of about 50,000 off of 300,000 people. So even if you said 10,000, they didn't even reach, and the 300,000 didn't even reach 300,000 until that time. So really, they'd have started off with smaller numbers. If these numbers were held true, they'd have started off with like 165,000 back in 1770. Can 165,000 people multiply enough by 1808, 1810 to be anywhere close to 1.19 million plus? It don't really tell you how many free blacks between those years. I'd have to go get the blank breakdown, but this would be 1850, 275. So let's just say half of that, 150,000 or something. Free black people. So almost 1.5 million black folks coming off of that many. Let math class begin. I just looked at it. Right. So now you got to think too. Then they said 1 million people after this was transported from the upper south to the lower south. Well, I mean, you only had 1.5 million around that time, so or 1.2 million as far as slaves counted, right? So that means almost everybody should be there and not in all these other states. Like there would be a drastic change in numbers between here. A lot of downs and a lot of ups. And you don't see that. The only places where you see any downs that go down to nothing are going to be in the north, and I'll explain that. New York. They said in 1790 there was 21,000 blacks. It decreased to 20,000, decreased to 15,000, decreased to 10,000, and then all of a sudden 75. And all of a sudden, I guess they just got rid of all of them. By 1850, ain't no black people staying there. Is that true? Is that what that means? If I was just looking at it with a basic mind, right? As some of these researchers have, they would say, well, they took them all out. They went extinct. I ain't never heard of black people going extinct in New York. No, what happened was slavery had been abolished in the North. So those people who were slaves are now counted as what? Oh, there they go. There that number goes. There's 40,000 free black people in New York. You see how the numbers should match like that? That's why I wanted to show that too. You see how the numbers should match up like that? When there's a either migration or a change in status, you should see it, right? You should see the change in status. Is this an African trying to request up? E-Banks? I don't even know if I'll be able to hear you. Give me 2 seconds. Let me. Give me 2 seconds. I won't be able to hear you. Hold up. I gotta plug something in.
But no, I
Two
couldn't
seconds.
figure out, 'cause I was making my lunch the night before and I couldn't figure
Give me
out.
2 seconds.
So I packed a couple of different things and usually the extras I just put in her
Sounds like you're talking and not giving me 2 seconds.
All right.
Hold up.
Well, thank you.
Well, I can hear what you're saying there, sir.
Okay.
Because my screen on this phone,
It's hotel. That's what I.
Oh,
thing on this phone is.
I'm gonna find some chips.
I might have some. The ones I have.
Oh, you still have chips? You still have chips from the other day?
Like the tortilla
Yeah.
chips? Yeah.
All right, sir. How can I help you?
Ain't work.
So you want some tortilla chips? I
Yeah.
can go run and get you one.
Yeah.
How can I help you?
Thank you.
You're welcome. Oh yeah, I figured I was just tucking under your stuff. 'Cause you're
Oh, he must have accidentally did that. Maybe he accidentally. Can y'all hear me? Can y'all hear me okay? Oh, he made a mistake. Yeah, okay. Yeah, that's what it sounded like. It sounded like he made a mistake. Okay, y'all can hear me. Cool. I'm just making sure when I plug this thing. All right, well, I'm about to get rid of you on the stage. Y'all see why I let him up? Y'all see the avatar. I say, okay, let's have a little fun here now. Yeah, let me unplug that. Okay, yeah, y'all see the avatar. I was like, let's have a little fun here for about 3-4 minutes. Because y'all know I will clown, okay? I will straight clown. Yeah. It is so futile coming up on my panel to troll. Futile. Okay. But as we see, if people had a change in status, but were still there, you would see it. When things that we know really happened, like the abolishment of slavery in the North, that's why the North now has, Jersey has 20,000, Carolina don't have that many, that's not the North. Pennsylvania, 38,000, Maryland, 61,000 free, plus the mulattoes, okay? But, we have all those people free. And when we go and look at those states above, like Maryland should be low too. Maryland had 103,000, and look how it went down. Notice it went down. A lot of people became free. I guess not everybody became free. I don't know what's up with that. Maryland was late to the game or something. I don't know. But, okay. So we should see the same thing for this so-called migration. Well, on top of that, this dude, the way they explain these stories, I'm about to play this. The way they explain these slave stories, these narratives, oh, they had high unalivement rates, and because they was being worked to exhaustions and all this other stuff. It's just like, well, shit. How do all these numbers keep increasing if that's happening? So you got all that going on, but these people are still having tons of babies, still living, I guess, long lives, even though y'all said that they had short lifespans when they first got here, which is crazy. And all this. So they're really making it hard on themselves. But let's listen. Why ain't it playing? I hate it.
Fought for control of the region. And by the 1700s, as we all know, Spain ceded its territory of Florida to Great Britain. Now, the first ship with enslaved African people, which numbered about 20, was brought to the American British colonies in the year 1619. This number, brought to the United States, eventually reached some 500,000.
Notice how he went there. You see how he did that? Well, they brought 20 guys in 16, 19, and about 500,000 came. Yeah, after that. See, they want you to think they all came during that time frame, right? But remember, they want to add on them years because their records show they don't really start doing it until 1715. So any little 20 and 30 and smalls coming over would have been little small nothings, which makes it hard to make up for some of these numbers in the colonies early days, so they got to make up a story, right? They got to keep the story going and use the same slave ship thing because they don't have any other proof. Let's just say if there was tons of proof of this happening all over the place, they would have an array of pictures to choose from, but they always choose this for a slave ship photo, right? The most asinine, unrelenting, whatever kind of photo that's almost impossible to do. Not almost impossible to do. But that's all they can find when they go Google searching. Now these are professors, right? You would think they have access to the archives, okay, to really dig through the crates to bring you substantial slave proof. But okay, this is what they choose. Okay, let's keep on.
Forcibly taken over the next. This number, brought to the United States, eventually reached some 500,000 who were forcibly taken over the next 200 years. Of course, millions more Africans were kidnapped from their villages and taken to other parts of the New World, the Caribbean and South America, as well as nations in the Indian Ocean. Now, one of the important dates in...
As you see, he just kind of glazed over the whole, slavery started 16, 19, 20 people and 500,000 swelled, and he had to throw the word about millions in there. So then he says, oh, but millions more were shipped around as well, and this and that, to explain the ones in the down below. It's like they always got to do it in certain steps. But okay, let's keep on.
The slave trade is the year 1808. Because in that year, the importation of captured and enslaved Africans was banned in the United States. Now, this date, 1808, was actually a compromise between Northern Abolition, fought, were by law supposed to be imported from Africa. Of course, many illegal ships still continued to arrive. Now, this is a memorial to the slave trade. Notice the chains at their feet along the river in downtown Savannah, Georgia. And the base of this...
basically, all he got for proof is old slave ship faked drawings and a modern-day statue of people being chained.
Memorial has a quotation by Maya Angelou describing the brutal conditions aboard slave ships.
Maya Angelou describing the brutal whatever aboard slave ships that she never witnessed because she wasn't born during those times, and neither was her mom or her grandma. So who did she hear that from? Anyway.
And by the way, the port of Savannah, where this memorial is located, was a major receiver of enslaved West Africans after Georgia legalized slavery in 1750.
Georgia legalized slavery in 1750. That's a little late in the game. I thought they was bringing slaves in here by 1750, and I guess that was mostly coming into Virginia before you start sending them into Georgia. So that gives Georgia not much time, 50 years, 58 years, to even be able to get many slaves, supposedly, unless they just already were there and then they just made a law for it.
So this date, 1808, is quite important because not only did it legally attempt to stop the importation of new slaves, but accordingly, it also affected how slaves were treated. And that is that before 1808, the plantation owners, the white plantation owners, knew that they had an endless supply of enslaved Africans that they could bring into the United States. As a result, their treatment was particularly harsh, resulting in very short lifespans, since the plantation owners knew it didn't matter. If they died, they could always get new slaves.
So what you got to realize is that why listen to these stories, like the one I showed you earlier, some of the ones I showed you earlier, they always put extras on it. Like, and they always have to come up with some kind of, like in that textbook, it was like, the YT slave owners didn't really have any kind of morals because they was just doing a job. That was in the school textbook, 1996. Now here you have him, and now that's just based off of conjecture. They don't really, they just saying that shit. Same thing with this. He shows you the slave burials and makes it seem like all these slaves were just, all over the place being unalive like crazy, but you don't see a whole lot of burials there. You know what I'm saying? And in fact, I feel like that little section that's roped off is probably the little slave burials area. And the ones back there in the back probably ain't even theirs. But it's just like you found a little slave burial area photo and you was like, oh, great. Yeah, this is a great way to, show that the people were, unalived quickly and they didn't care, right? You got to come up with some demoralized way that the YT folks felt about the slaves. And this was his way of coming up with it with no documented proof or no accounts, no primary documented sources saying, hey, I don't care about these slaves. I'm going to treat them like shit. And I'm just going to, give me some new ones next week. Okay. But what this does, what all this conjecture does is hurt their claims of these population increases, as well as it hurts their claims of them paying their slaves. Why would you pay them? You didn't have no morals. You all of a sudden got morals to pay them, but you was working them to death. and you knew you can get them anywhere you can get them, so who cares? I'm just going to work it. But let me throw some money in your pocket. Legally, I ain't got to, so I'm just being a nice fellow in between the harsh and brutalness that I'm inflicting on you. Okay? Appreciate the follows, y'all. Appreciate everybody coming in. But it really hurts the population numbers increasing because it doesn't really help their case. But let's keep going. He's going to try to explain why those population numbers increases as well.
From Africa and bring them in by ship. After the importation ban, although, as I say, some illegal ship arrivals still occurred, and all the way up to the Civil War, white slave owners had to modify their tactics, and instead they worked with the slaves who they already had here, and they encouraged or even fathered breed stock children to maintain the enslaved population. Now, there's another distinction of the American slave system.
Notice he said they fathered or did breed stock children. Fathered a lot of the children. That's that graping, right? That they try to say. This one document from the government really debunks a lot of these damn stories because it's like, y'all so stupid. Because think about it. Think about this. They counted the mulattoes. Now, if they counted the mulattoes, that means they knew who was a mulatto, meaning who was mixed with a YT person, especially during slavery times, right? Because that's when it would have happened, right? All during this time is when that graping would have been going on, right? Just extensive grapes, right? Especially after 1808, according to him, because you could get slaves. So why would you breed with them? You don't like these people. Why would you do that? That's dirty and nasty. So you're not gonna, which they the ones that's dirty and nasty, but that's dirty and nasty. So you're not gonna breed with these people. No disrespect to those of the modern times, but those these people were dirty and nasty. But 1790 to 1808 and all before that, you can get as many as you want from Africa. So you're not breeding with them according to him and his conjecture. And then from here to here, they gotta what? They gotta figure out how to explain these increases. Well, it was either slave breeding or, according to him, breed stock children fathering them. Well, how many mulattoes were there? Let's just say in Alabama alone by 1850, out of 321,000 blacks, there was 321,000, not out of, but there was 321,000 blacks, 23,000 mulattoes, y'all. Now, it's 23,000. Does that make up for the amount of increase from here to here and here to here? Nah, that's a little bit off. That's a little bit off. 41,000 to 253,000. You're not really explaining the jump. You're not really explaining it. Slave breeding. Well, somewhere down in here, I can't control F. I wish I could, but I don't want to go. I wish I would have had it already. But they talk about the birth rates, and I can't remember how they classify Alabama. I really would like to see. Let me see. Let me check my phone too. All right. Alabama, let's see, birds. See if I can find it real quick. Female slaves, number and increase of slaves. So that's showing that those increases is just giving kind of a free colored population, slave males, slave population. Area, this thing is kind of long, so I'm gonna just go down a little bit further. And there's a dude on here named OHF. He be trying to use this document ever since he got it out, got it through me. Not that I sent it through him, but he seen me using it on live streams to debunk people. And he be using it for one simple thing, to try to prove that we're African. It's so stupid. It's just one line. Decennial population increase. That says something like, "Oh, this is the what you call it, the people here are either black or African descent." And people be like, "It says or African descent. It says black or African." And then he's taking it to mean black or African, meaning like, you can call these people this or that, but they're the same thing. Like almost like saying you can call these people colored or Negro, but they're the same thing. So he's like, oh, that's what that means. That's what the or means. So that's the only thing he could find out of this document. And he still uses it way later for that one little thing, even though it's a super expansive document that you can use to explain a lot. All right, it looks like I'm not going to be able, because this thing is long as hell. It looks like I'm not going to be able to find it that fast. But, they got to make up a reason for why that number is what it is, how those increases happened. And that's usually where they're coming up with either graping stories or slave breeding stories, after telling you all these stories of how much they don't care about the slaves and was unaliving them early, short lifespans, even though we don't really see that in the numbers. short lifespans, this and then the third, that's what they try to say. Like maybe Maryland had a short lifespan because they only had 103, 105, 111. They had short increases. And maybe Maryland might have had some. Well, Maryland's up there in the north, though, also. So that could have been. Let me see what the free population looked like in Maryland in 1850. It went up to 61,000. So I was about to say, where are all the black people going? Again, we can account for it, right? They're right there. So I was about to say, well, they got a little slight thing. It's not increasing like I would think it should be increasing, but I see why, because people were becoming free. So yeah. So back to this slavery propaganda. Not according to the Mason-Dixon line. All right, I don't know what you're talking about right there. You said not according to the Mason-Dixon line. Is that like? I know what the Mason-Dixon line, my bad, is, but like, when I say I don't know what you're talking about right there, I mean like you might be talking about something to somebody in the chat, and I don't know. So I don't want to respond and be wrong. Be like, I don't know, because I do that a lot, and I realized that. And not that I thought what you were saying was wrong. I didn't understand what you were meaning by it, really. So, but then that's why I was like, oh well, I don't even know what you're talking about. So that makes sense. Let me go down here. Slave. So we're going to talk about a little bit more of this slavery propaganda. So you got Alex Haley roots, and that was in the school books, right? And they were just basically a scarier chapter to say all this crazy stuff happened on some boats and people taking bites out of the ground of Africa, which is just crazy. But then he's like, whoops, I didn't mean to do that. I actually plagiarized that. Even though it says, even though I told y'all that I can trace my family and Kunta Kinte was my real family member, even though I told y'all that. Where's my other screenshot that said Alex Haley? Where's the screenshot with his face on it? Oh, there you go. Even though I told y'all that, I was just playing. I admitted to plagiarizing some of that shit, All right, so a bunch of lies that made it to the textbooks and curriculum because school boards apparently don't have enough wherewithal to research things before they put them into the school curriculums. But what's funny also about Mr. Alex Haley, I think I have the screenshots down here. Let me see. Is he had a Alex Haley Foundation, a Kunta Kinte Foundation. This is going to be something that eventually I'm going to go over. But when you go to their website, you can see their earnings. Now, in 2024, they show revenue of $13,000 and expenses of $13,000. Wow, that's funny. They had the exact amount of expenses as revenue. That's not typical. That's not hard. $13,000 ain't a lot of money, so I ain't tripping on that, right? That's the first thing I saw. But I started looking at the previous years. I said, oh, that's 2024. All right, 13,000 expenses, net income. They don't have any money now. I said, oh, they ain't got no money. Well, he ain't making no money, right? Right? Let's look at 2023. Oh, wait a minute. That's $500,000. Where'd that come from? And all of a sudden you had $491,000 in expenses. Okay. Let's go back. 2022. There's the money. It was in your assets. Your expenses that year was $17,000 with not much income according to you. 2021, money's in there. Expenses, $15K. So your expenses seem to be about the norm. Seems like your expenses is probably just little small things, office space, advertise, I don't know, what else, property taxes or something. $500K still there, 2020. $500K expenses. So what do y'all think happened with the Kunta Kinte Foundation that had been holding $500,000 for quite some time? What do you think happened to it? Let's go back up here. What happened that all of a sudden one year they went from having an average of $15,000 to $20,000 in expenses? Appreciate that. To all of a sudden having $500,000 in expenses. Represents the task force popping off. I'll tell you what happened. According to them, they liquidated an asset. Do I have that? I may not have it listed here. I may have to go back to the website or something. But or did it show down here? I found it somewhere or something. But long story short, you either liquidate your assets, which means you may have been sitting on a $500,000 building, a building worth $500,000, and you have been claiming it as an asset, and you sell the building off for $500,000, and you pocket that bread. Or the assets were money sitting there, just in money sitting in an account, and now all of a sudden one year in 2023, it's kind of funny. All of a sudden you took off with the bread. Ain't no telling what, but that's just a little speculation on my behalf that, he made a lot of money off of over $500,000. That was in the later years. I don't, and he had that story been going on for a long time. That was in the 2000s. I'm sorry. I'm about to say the 2020s, but the 2000s. So, but this movie was made long ago. So this man and the family and whoever owns this whole whatever, they've been making more money than that. But it looks like the money's been slowing down and they done cashed out one last time. So they done made their money off of the propaganda they've pushed. Now, when we're talking about slavery, I found this. Let me show you where I found it so people don't think, I'm on some BS. If you go to the Library of Congress and simply search the word slave, let me move this a bit. You'll get this document pretty quick. Right there. Okay, so this is where I found it. But I'm going to pull it up over here because it's easier to navigate as I can get really, 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 really close. Okay? That's very much needed with this small-ass print. So, they're talking about the District of Columbia, Washington, D.C., over there in Virginia. Okay? And they talk about the right to interfere, public prisons in the court district. They're talking about public prisons. And they're talking about private prisons, right? And we talk about private prisons today. And the private prisons' effect on our people, right? But this was, at the time, talking about something else. It's going to be kind of hard to fit this all on here and read it where y'all can see it all because it's so small. Y'all just have to believe me, and I'll zoom in on things that make a lot that are important. But it says we'll start at the second paragraph. In 1820, and we're thinking now dates. 1820. That's funny. That's after the Louisiana Purchase. That's well after the whole slavery importations was banned and all this other stuff. Really, everybody should be slaves for the most part. Not a whole lot of people free. But they're doing this. It says the Senate and House of Representatives of the United States of America in Congress assembled empowered the corporation of the city of Washington to prescribe. It's funny, they don't really call themselves a corporation like that no more all the time. But, back then they were out with it. To prescribe the terms and conditions upon which free Negroes and mulattoes may reside in the city. On this authority in May 1827, that corporation enacted that every free Negro or mulatto, whether male or female, may come to the city of Washington to reside, or who may come to the city of Washington to reside, shall within 30 days exhibit to the mayor satisfactory evidence of his or her title of freedom to be recorded, and shall enter into bonds with two freehold sureties in the penalty of $500 conditioned on his or her good conduct, that they will not become chargeable to the corporation for the space of 12 months. The bond to be renewed every year for 3 years. On failure of this, he or she must depart the city or be committed to the workhouse, not exceeding 12 months in any one imprisonment. And all Negroes found residing in the city after the passage of the act, who shall not be able to establish their title of freedom except for those who may be hired, shall be committed to the jail as absconding slaves. Okay, that was a lot. What was that saying? What is that saying? That's saying that, hey, if you want to live in Virginia or the city of Washington, D.C., you got to show proof that you're a free person, satisfactory proof to the mayor. And you also have to enter into bonds with two freehold sureties. And I'm not sure, in the penalty of $500. I'm not sure what that means exactly. It's like you got to enter into a bond with two freehold. You know what? Let me ask ChatGPT. Copy it. Are they gonna copy that? It must be the type of document it is. And some of y'all may know. Yeah, somebody said in contracts. Yeah. Let's see. What did it say? Enter into bonds with two freehold sureties in the penalty of $500. What does it mean to enter into bonds with two freehold sureties with the penalty of $500? Excuse me. Ooh, hold up. Damn it, get off of there. Sureties. I'll probably spelled that wrong. Hold on. To enter into bonds with two freehold sureties with a penalty of $500. Enter into bonds, you, the main person, sometimes called principal, agree in writing to be legally bound to pay a certain amount of money if you fail to do something required. Okay. With freehold sureties, you must have two other people act as guarantors of the sureties. A freehold means they each own real property, land or a house outright, not just lease it. Their property shows they are financially reliable and can cover the bonds. Oh, like a bond, just like if somebody's bonding you out of prison, but they wanted you to enter into a bonds just to be in the city. With the penalty of $500, the total amount of $500. I mean, and if you or your sureties fail to meet the conditions, you would have to pay $500. Wow, bondsmen, bill insurance, interest, yeah, co-signers. Those are people putting up the money for your bond. Yeah. So you already had it, giving up your birthright, and copy from there. Oh, yeah, I could have took a screenshot and then copied it. Or go to the website and copy from there. Yeah. I probably should have did that too. And that's why they have to go to insurance companies. Wow. Go out to the insurance company. I think they have to pay $500 to stay out of jail. Close. Yeah, somebody said, I told you, pal. Man, y'all was on it. And I remember reading that, and I kept wondering, what do they mean you have to enter into bonds with two freehold sureties? I definitely didn't think about bonds as being bondsmen for whatever reason, even though this thing is talking about prisons and stuff. But this was just talking about people coming to the city. So just residing in the city, you had to provide both paperwork and enter into a bonds and have two people sign for you. That's crazy. Or you'd be sent to slavery. And now you know why that's important? It's because there was already a lot of black people in Virginia. So enacting that really is kind of crazy. But it says, by this law, color is made a crime. It says, my bad. Let me zoom out a bit so y'all can see a little bit more. It says, by this law, right here, by this law, color is made a crime which first robs citizens of their constitutional as well as inalienable rights, and is then taken as evidence that they are slaves. And then to crown all, a large posse of constables and other officers, some of them in the pay of the government, are charged with the execution of the laws and forfeit. So basically, you got police as well as those not renegade people. Y'all know what I'm talking about. Your dog, the bounty hunter motherfuckers. Fuck, I can't think of the name of it. Y'all probably gonna throw it in there before I think of it. Bills, but not Bills Bondsman. What are they called? The people that actually, but the bounty hunters. Bounty hunters. There we go. Yeah, bounty hunters. So this is kind of the start of like bounty hunters of police. Well, not the start of police, because police apparently was before that, but, and I got to look into that. But I mean, this is like one thing almost like that. So, and with the execution of the laws and forfeit and pay for every neglect or failure a fine not exceeding $20. City laws. The results is that free citizens are often arrested. Free citizens, notice this, free citizens are often arrested after this law in 1820. By 1820, they start doing this thing, this trickery, where they start having those slave schedules a lot. 1790, you really get slave schedules around 1810 to 1820, I think. They want to start counting everybody as slaves, that's black skinned, even though everybody wasn't slaves. But if you were a black person who lived under another black person, but you weren't able to produce free paperwork to show that you was free, but your dad was free and your mom, and he was the owner, head of household, you would go down as a little tick mark as a slave. So this is really kind of, in my opinion, showing even more so the trickery of trying to make black people look like slaves when they weren't all slaves like that. Okay, a lot of them were not direct plantation slaves, I should say. Now, people work for people, different things, but just because you was working for somebody don't mean you were a slave. And just because, and anyway, so let's keep on. I want to get back into that. Plunged into prison and then sold for, so it's like the result is that free citizens are often arrested, plunged into prison, and then sold for jail fees as slaves for life. So you make a law in a state that's full of a bunch of black folks, and you say, hey, I need to see y'all's paperwork, and if you're gonna stay up in this state, and if you ain't, and if you don't produce that paperwork within 60 days, if we find you out there, we gonna throw you in jail, and you're gonna start accruing these jail fees, and if you can't pay those jail fees, well, we're going to actually really sell you as a real slave, because you never really proved that you wasn't a slave, right? So we're going to sell you as a slave and make our money off you. And ain't that a racket? In 1829, Mr. Minor of Penn declared in Congress that in 1826, 7 no less than 5 persons were thus sold. But then in July 1834, in Washington paper was the following. It says, notice, was committed to the prison of Washington, D.C. on the 19th day of May, 1834, as a runaway, a Negro man who calls himself David Peck. He is about 5 feet 8 inches high, had on when he committed a check shirt, linen pantaloons, and straw hat. He says he is free and belongs to Baltimore. Okay? He's from Baltimore and he's a free person. Down there in Virginia now. He says the owner or owners are hereby requested, or unless they say he's Baltimore is the person that he belongs to, and that's their name, it says the owner or owners are hereby requested to come forward, prove him, and take him away, or he will be sold for his prison and other expenses as the law directs. So that's just him bringing up at least one instance in the newspaper where he's seen it happen. And that was from the keepers of the prison. So it says, hey, the above specimen, he's talking about this above excerpt that I just put in there, 4 other persons last week. He said, but the above is but a specimen. He said, that's just one of them. 4 other persons, at least, who said they were free, have been advertised in a similar way within the last year. One keeper of the jail in Washington stated that 5 years upwards of 450 colored persons had been lodged there for safekeeping, i.e., until they can be disposed of in the course of the slave trade. Typically, when you hear people say the slave trade, you just think, oh, they're talking about the boat trade, But no, because then there's intercontinental and all this other stuff. But it says, besides nearly 300 who had been taken up and lodged there as runaways. The above gives some idea of the interior of the prison in Washington. Reverend A.A. Phelps of Boston visited it in April 1834 and makes the following statement. He says, there are in the prison 16 solitary cells on the lower floor, the debtors and criminals' rooms being above. These cells are mostly used for the confinement of slaves lodged there by the master as a punishment for some fault. Of slaves suing for their freedom, as they termed it, and of colored persons, bond or free, arrested as runaways or lodged there by the slave dealers. So, it was just like anybody. And it says, we found not less than 13 individuals in them at this time, everyone whom claimed that one on the ground of another, they were entitled to their freedom. So all these people said they were free. They were free folks. In one cell, we found a Fanny Jackson with 3 little children, one of them an infant at her breast. Her husband, also in the prison, was in a separate cell. They were claimed by one Asa Buckner of London County, Virginia. But having been in Washington several years, unclaimed by the master, they were suing for their freedom under some act which entitled them to do it. They had lain in prison awaiting their trial 9 months. We spoke to the mother about her little ones, and we found she had indeed a mother's heart. The scene cannot be described. So, I'm not going to read the rest of this part, but it's basically giving you examples of some of the people who were caught up. Again, these people were free citizens who, because of the law being passed, all of a sudden now they got to produce this evidence that they may not have, like you got to get your license, right, or some shit. And when you're walking around, you ain't got your license on you, or your slave papers, your freedom paper, whatever, you know what I'm saying? They snatch you up and take you to the jail. And if you can't pay the jail fees, well, too bad. Nobody came and got you, so we're just going to sell you as a slave for life. Now, what happens after they do that? Well, they talk about the establishment of private prisons. And as you can see, this is one guy marching them out of one of those things. Private prison. It says this establishment owned by W. Rodney, who is also engaged in the trade in May 1834, a gentleman visited it and fell into the conversation with the overseer of the pen. He heard the clanking of chains within the pen. Oh, said the overseer, himself a slave, I have seen 50 or 70 slaves taken out of the pen, and the males chained together in pairs and drove off to the south, and how they would cry and groan and take on and wring their heads, but the driver would put on the whip and tell them, shut up, off you go, whatever. So they're saying that some of these people were sold to the south, which I'm not against that. I just know I know it ain't a million of them, as they tried to say, because now they're trying to say, the other one tried to say there was a forced migration of a bunch of them to the south, just because westward expansion in a sense, and there was a heavy slave craving for slaves, but they didn't even get over there to even crave the slaves until after 1810, 1820. Louisiana Purchase 1808, 1803, and then Alabama statehood around that time, 1810, 1820. So like, they couldn't have a giant craving. And then I can see some people forced to go there. But as you can see here, they were just saying they was forcing people just from random plantations. But right here, what you see is people being imprisoned that were free citizens. Now that I think about it, people who were free citizens that were imprisoned on some bullshit, who are now being sold down to the south even further. And it shows here that they were shipping you to different areas on boats. So when we say that they were shipping our people around in different places, we know what they mean, okay? But some people don't know that it was being done through this reason, through the fact that being done through this whole situation, through jail, going through jail and all that other stuff. So this just kind of helps to paint a different picture of this whole slavery narrative, because you think it's just people coming up over a boat, but it's like, it really was a lot of different trickery. And it wasn't just that. A lot of people who were slaves were also Indians. So you have like this Department of Interior, and people will say the Indians own slaves, and they even say they didn't own that many slaves. Like even in this book I got, it says the Chickasaws alone said they only owned about 1,000 slaves in that whole territory. So, but there's hundreds of thousands of black people that's already there when they move, when the white folks come there. But right here you got James Chief, and it says, he asked him, how old are you? He says 50. He says, you swore 2 years ago that you was 52. And he says, my bad. He says, I will take it back then. I am not educated. I was raised and born full-blood Indian. Right there. Okay? Right under that. So that's his oral account that he's a full-blooded Indian. But they didn't give a damn. They was putting him on the freedman rolls no matter what, right? And then you go down here, though, and you notice that they asked him, let's see. Who were you a slave of? A slave of a fella named Jackson. Now, that story gets a little bit deeper, but I ain't going to get into all that. But he was a slave of a fella named Jackson, according to this, right? So here we have an Indian claiming to be full-blood Indian, and I believe him. They put him on the freedman rolls, but he was a Chickasaw. He was a slave to a Chickasaw Indian. And then I start going down further, like what could he have been? And looking further down here, the rest of his family, it says, I think they are enrolled. It says, were you married? Yes, sir. I got other children, but they are enrolled in the Creek or Yuchi tribe. Yuchi tribe. So they might be Yuchi. So they may have originally been Yuchi Indians and ended up as slaves under the Chickasaws. That's one thing. But also the Yuchis come from the Choctaws and Chickasaws, but that's another thing. Let's see here. And so when we talk about this slavery propaganda, I'm probably going to be getting off here pretty soon because I'm already kind of tired been talking, I guess, for a couple hours, 2.5 hours. There's a lot of propaganda to go through and to show. Now, in this, I also go into how, white folks were slaves as well, They were some of the first slaves in the world. The word slave comes from them, which is Slav. Like this is a sculpture of a dying Slav, but you see who it is, right? Talks more about it. I think, Michelangelo did it. Michelangelo did that one. But I even got videos about them saying Slavs and stuff. And when you look up the word Slav, that it comes from Czechos, like the Slovakians. So, but that's still not to say that slavery didn't happen in America, but slavery still, like they said, they came over as indentured servants, but, that's what I was going to say. I was trying to think that there was something that I was going to show y'all. I do remember. Let me just see if I can find it. It's something called the Harrison's Law, my bad. Here we go. Harrison's Law. Right there. Harrison's Law. Okay. Now this is in 1840. All right. And we're talking about Harrison's Law. And it says the Whig Committee have come out with an address, the chief object of which is to induce the people to believe that Harrison's Law for selling and whipping white men and women, okay, applied to criminals only. They're trying to say, hey, we came out with a law, and that really law that needs to apply to just criminals only. We don't need to sell and whip. Who were they selling and whipping before that? Before they made a law? Right? Who were they selling and whipping before that? Not us, of course. I mean, not to say that some of us didn't get sold and whipped, but I'm just saying, like, what YT people were being sold and whipped before they were criminals, before they were just applying this to criminals. And it says, and on this false ground, they labor to excite the indignation of the people against the notion of working for criminals that is taxing the county to support them in jail. Okay? Excuse me. People against the notion of working criminals, that is taxing the county. Oh, I didn't think about that. I've read this many times, but it says, and on the false, they labor to excite the indignation of the people against the notion of working for criminals, that is taxing the county to support them in jail. So it's almost like instead of coming up with these big industrial prison complexes that we have, they was like, and paying the tax money to support those jail systems, this would be the alternative. It says the law applied to wrongs committed against the public, to misdemeanors as well as crimes, between which there is a very great difference. And although the act which drew down the penalty of the law were such as might in general be avoided, they did not partake of that high culpability requiring selling and whipping. And what are the acts for which Harrisons would sell and whip a poor man or woman? Then we go over here, and it says, we'll start on this one because I think that's kind of odd, but it says, we quote from the contemporary who says, there are many acts which in themselves are not any way criminal, which are made offenses by prohibition. For example, a poor girl, YT girl is what they're talking about, as it has been remarked, carrying her butter to the market, trots her horse across a bridge. I guess when you trot your horse across a bridge, that's a violation, is prosecuted, and unable to pay the fines and costs, and is sold into slavery. Notice how many of y'all knew that just not being able to pay your fines and costs would sell you into slavery? We just saw that in the other document, right? They'll arrest you for something, make some crazy law, and then when you break it, then they're gonna sell you into slavery. But it's kind of crazy. But either way, also just thinking, YT folks could get caught up in that too. It says a Negro becomes her purchaser, who may whip her with 39 stripes on her bare back if she attempts to escape. What a killing sympathy for a poor people. And then they say, what if a father in a moment of irritation resents an insult offered to his daughter? He is unable to pay the fines and costs and is sold under the Harrison's law into bondage. What does that mean? What if somebody talks shit about your daughter and you went off on somebody, but then you get put in jail because you was just trying to defend your daughter's honor, and now you get sold to a nigga who gonna beat you on your bare back? That still happens. You get sold to somebody who gonna beat you on your bare back. You know what I'm saying? It says a revolutionary soldier, as suggested by Governor Lucas in opposition with the law in Ohio, may be insulted when going to the polls by a Tory, by a British Whig. He resents it, subjects himself to fines, which he is too poor to pay, is sold his Tory. I guess I don't have that. Wait a minute, where'd it go? Oh, this is the continuation of that other one. It's just not in order. The unable to pay the fine, the penalty of the law. Okay. Same thing. Basically, okay, here it goes. Tory oppressor. The Tory oppressor becomes the old man's purchaser, drives him off into slavery, and whips him 39 stripes. Why 39 every time? Why 39? Such are, and that's an odd number. But 3, 6, and 9 are important numbers, but still, that's an odd number. Such are some of the beauties of General Harrison's law. Such a man is no Democrat as his heart, whatever. So, and then you got things like people paying to get out of the slavery through installment payments. Like, I guess I got to get the book cover. But this is A Slave Among Slaves, Up From Slavery. Up From Slavery is the name of the autobiography, but this is the autobiography of Booker T. Washington. And on one of these pages, this page right here, he says, hey, one of the best illustrations of this, is which I know of, is the case of an ex-slave from Virginia, whom I met not long ago in a little town of the state of Ohio. I found that this man had made a contract with his master 2 or 3 years previous to the Emancipation Proclamation, to the effect that the slave would be permitted to buy himself by paying so much per year for his freedom or body. And while he was paying for himself, his freedom, he was to be permitted to labor where and with whom he pleased. Finding that he could secure better wages in Ohio, he went to Ohio. When freedom came, he was still in debt to his master some $300. Notwithstanding that the Emancipation Proclamation freed him from any obligation to his master, this black man walked the greater portion of his distance back to where his old master lived in Virginia, and placed the last dollars with interest in his hands. In talking to me about this, the man told me that he knew that he did not have to pay the debt, but he had given his word to his master, and his word he had never broken. He felt that he could not enjoy his freedom until he had fulfilled his promise. Okay, so think about that. 39 times in the same amount Yeshua was whipped. Really? Was that the amount of times they hit up your boy on the cross? I didn't know that. And he was 33 when he got crucified, wasn't he? So much symbolism. And he was sold for 30 pieces of silver. Wow. 10, 3 times. So think about this. You could pay for your slavery, freedom of your slavery through payments. And this was in Virginia. Dude out of Virginia. That's very close to Washington, D.C. That's very close to where laws were harsh. But still, some people found a way, even in some of the harshest places. 40 was legally considered to kill an unalive man. The number of completion in the Holy Trinity. It's the reversal of the divine feminine. So we getting deep. Y'all getting deep. I love it. Excuse me. So it's just a whole lot of slavery propaganda. I'm gonna have a whole documentary about this slavery thing to see how much we can prove, how much we can't prove. This would be a slave ship or a ship from that time, like a model, a little miniature model of one. And when I saw it, it made me think. First thing I said is, oh, that's where you store all the goods. Like when you be like, where'd all the food go? Because you got people on the top deck, and you never have the food all on the top deck, right? So they have to put the food down there. So then I had to ask the question. So when they brought over slaves, were the slaves on this level or on this level? Likely they would be on this level and not spread across the little whatever, right? But if they're on this level and they're pissing and shitting all over the place, right, as they said, that stuff would be seeping through the wood and getting all on your food and your provisions. That would be nasty. That would cause problems. Don't look like y'all have enough room for all that. And it looks like you got to store quite a bit of barrels so you can support yourself. But, that's some slavery propaganda too, and this right here is on the walls of Spain. Now, yes, the Spaniards came, and as you can see, there's España, and it shows their trips. The voyagers going to here, right? Notice it's like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 lines, and then you got 7 lines or whatever there. Some people returning back. But notice over here how many lines you got from the Philippines. Who knew that so many people were being brought over? Even more people came over from this side of the world, from Spain at least, than on the other side. Even a lot of people from France came this way too. Louis Corse and some of them made voyages this way. But this is just your Spaniards. So then you should start asking questions. Notice the places they're landing. So do you understand why these people look like they're Asians and claim to be Americans? Claim to be natives? Well, they came from right over here from the Philippines. Don't they look like Filipinos, right? Or Mongolians who mix with the original Filipinos, because the original Filipinos are hella black skin looking, not melanated, so-called black, right? I might even show that real quick. But we know that that's a fact. But Spain was coming across this way, or they was coming down through here. They must have came down through this way and then started taking off, because it doesn't show anything's coming around except for a couple. So for the most part, they must have, when they conquered the Philippines and named it the Philippines after King Philip of Spain, which is why it's called the Philippines now, then they started bringing them niggas over. And that's why there's a book called From Chinos to Slaves. From Chinos to Indians, I'm sorry. Look up the Philippines was a U.S. territory for a short time. I can believe it, and that's why we got a heavy presence in the Philippines now, which is crazy. And of course, a lot of them went to South America too. So when you have all these Asians that's claiming to be Indians compared to all the black folks that they want to call Africans over there, you can see where they came from. They didn't just pop up. And this is on a wall. This is on a wall. I went to the website and did a 3D virtual tour around their website. I mean, around their museum. The whole website is in Spanish. So like I would literally was like, let me go see what the museums in Spain look like, and I looked up like navigational museums or naval museums or something like that. And then here you go, like he said, yeah, they dropped a lot of those Filipinos off on the outskirts of New Orleans. Yeah, which is crazy because you'll see some of them you'll see a lot of the people in the New Orleans, and then you'll see some of them here as well, but you'll also see a lot of Spaniards and them. And just think, the Spaniards have been mixing with them as well. Likely. They wasn't always just mixing with us. But I also don't like to just say people were mixing without proof. I think in that Chinos to Indians and also in that caste system, it kind of shows that a little bit of proof. But I have a book that talks about Spaniards mixing more so with Moors instead of black Indians, Moors, but just Moors that they brought in that came with them, not that they brought in, that came with them, and they were making these mixed copper-colored races, and that's almost confusing to us, right? We'll see these copper-colored offspring and think they one of our people sometimes, but and also they be looking good. I ain't even gonna lie, but still. This is what you got, So anyways, I'm about to get off here. Your boy, as you can tell, I'm kind of tired. Probably because I was up late last night, too, and I was on a long live stream. So, yeah, I just wanted to get it in this morning, too. Morning times, I like to do these live streams. Hey, bro, are you familiar with the story of Lemuria? Yes. Many different ways. In fact, when they talk about Lemuria, some people say Lemuria was where the Bermuda Island is, where the mu in Bermuda comes from. Lemuria, some people say that. And you also get that whole Bermuda Triangle stuff, that stuff happened. And Bermuda is like right off the coast, somewhere around right here. But some of these YT folks say that Bermuda was the island, was this area before it went underwater, and we have the remnants of it right here in the mainland. And Lemuria is supposed to be, appreciate you, you're welcome. Lemuria is supposed to be the first landmass that was formed or that hardened as in our godlike and human-like form in early days were able to come and settle upon. So like back then they say we were able to it's kind of like we dream now. And so when you're in your dreams, it's almost like you're back into your godlike state, your consciousness is no longer here per se, but your body and your physical and etheric body is still here pumping and going, but there's still a connection, a tethered connection. But back in the days, we used to just be able to jump out of the body and jump into a godlike body, you know what I'm saying? Whenever we felt like it. Change our bodies when we want to. It was like in the early stages of humanity. And they say Lemuria was forming around that time, and it was one of the first land masses. It was real thin coming up out of the crust, but we were able to settle upon it, but making like permanent settlements and stuff was kind of hard according to them because it took a while before it became hardened. Same thing with us. It took us a while before we became hardened. So the whole thing, when I'm saying like, and this is just a philosophical thing, this ain't nothing, whatever, but like they say that like, we was able to be, when we were gods like that, we were able to go up and down into the realm and like, let's say astral travel, if you will, just leave the body and switch bodies whenever, right? They said that the Egyptians started doing mummifications in order to accelerate the solidification of our bodies forcing us into this 3D world more so than to be able to go back and forth. So like we had that ability, but it's like what they said is like when you were unalived, typically your spirit can leave, but mummifying the body almost like forced your spirit to stay here even longer. And then when you finally do reincarnate, it was like it almost gradually degenerated our ability of being gods into just being just direct 3D human beings, physical and not non-physical beings. So now we don't know how to go back and do that shit again. But they did that for a particular reason, apparently, according to them. I'm getting all deep and philosophical with it, but these are just some things. What's up, Nikki? She said that's where one of my ancestors in slavery was ran off to by the Spanish in Louisiana. One of their ancestors. Oh, really? Ran off to by the Spanish in Louisiana. So like, were people first in the Caribbeans, and then I'll tell you why I can somewhat at least accept the idea. I know people were first in the Americas. Now, was it the Caribbeans, or was it here, or was it a combination? Was it here first and then came down? I'm not 100% sure, but one thing I will say is that in the equator zone, it's the best temperatures. It's the most beautiful everything, the most fertile everything, right? So if you don't have to pay to live somewhere like we do now and have passports and all this other stuff, and you can just roam the planet and you can pick where you want to stay, where would you stay? I doubt I would stay in the cold unless I'm just trying to get away from motherfuckers. I'm tired of these folks or something, or I just want to be an explorer or something like that. In many cases, you're probably going to settle along the equator. Now, along our equator, we'll go to a map. Now, along the equator, for us, I think the equator is really kind of here somewhere. Sometimes it shows it, but I think it's like, because I thought it cut against. I thought it cut against. Let me get a map of the equator. I thought it cut against a little bit of South America. Map of the equator. Yeah, it does. Okay. It kind of cuts off like that tip of South America, right? So, and it's very lush and green right there, right? Decently green right there too, right? Across the equator. But you're also going to get that, as we all know, right here is all beautiful. And what you have all through here are pyramids, giant structures, civilizations, old civilizations, all that stuff. Now you have the same thing here too. And a lot of these are dated. I think the mounds are dated older than those, to be honest. Cahokia Mound might be dated older than these. I have to double check. But that's what you got, So I'm not saying I can't fully say that, but I will say that at some point, even if these people did be the first ones, at some point, yeah, they did come down. Because why wouldn't you want to be amongst the good weather? Now coming across here, you don't really have the same thing going on over here. It's a bunch of desert, nothing bullshit right here. The one little pyramid, a few little pyramids you got is up there in the corner. But other than that, you don't really have too much. So I'm just kind of lingering around. Let me get off here. I've been keeping y'all's attention. But let me get off here so I can get my day started. I appreciate y'all coming through for some more lessons. And holla at your boy. I'll be back.